Welcome to Your Intended Message, the perfect place for leaders and promising professionals who want to convey the intended message for greater success. Every week, we interview experts who can help you communicate more effectively, whether that's one-to-one, one-to-few, or one-to-many. And perhaps the most important conversation, one-to-self. I'm your host, George Torok. My guest today is Ed Tate. Here's 3 facts that I believe you should know about Ed. 1, he was a world champion of public speaking. 2, he's a certified speaking professional. And 3, he has 2 children. David is 34 years old and Toriel is 1 year. Obviously, David wasn't bad enough of a teenager to prevent more teenagers in your family. Ed, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Thank you, George. I really, really appreciate being here. And for the audience's curiosity, David's from my first marriage, and then I got married about 7 years ago. My second wife wasn't supposed to be able to have children. She in her teenage years, she had emergency surgery. Apparently, she wasn't supposed to be able to have children. And for the first 4.5 years in our marriage, we had no reason to doubt that. And then now, so we have the blessing, which is my daughter, Toriel.
Wonderful. Wonderful blessing to have.
Yes.
I'm wondering about the title of World Champion of Public Speaking. Tell us what that's about and how did that come about?
Okay. So there's an organization called Toastmasters International. If you're curious, go to toastmasters.org. It's been around in excess of 80 years. And it's, in my opinion, this is my definition of Toastmasters. It's the best place on earth for you to improve your confidence. And they help you improve your confidence in 2 different areas. Number 1, leadership development. So it's a place for you to safely practice your leadership skills. And number 2, public speaking. They've had this contest. It's called the World Championship of Public Speaking. It's a year-long competition. There's 6 different rounds, and anywhere from 25 to 35,000 contestants worldwide. In the year 2000, I won the entire competition. And I will say this, it completely changed the trajectory of my life. I entered the competition at the assistance of one of my members in my local Toastmasters club in Denver, Colorado. And clearly he saw something in me that honestly I didn't see in myself. And he'd actually harassed me for 1.5 years to enter the competition. And finally, I had a conversation with him and I said, all right, here's the deal. I'm going to enter this darn contest. And the moment I lose, we'll never have this conversation again. And I did not lose. And again, it's completely changed the trajectory of my life. I've had a 20+ year career as a professional speaker. Absolutely love it. Again, I met my wife while I was on tour in South Africa. And again, I just absolutely enjoy it. But anyway, that's what Toastmasters is about. It's one of the best places in the world for you to improve your confidence.
I'm curious, Ed, you said it changed your life entirely. Mm-hmm. So you're saying you did not join Toastmasters because you wanted to be a professional speaker. Why did you join Toastmasters?
Okay, so I'm a former executive in the computer industry, and I'm a sales guy, if you will. So what had happened was I had just recently joined a software company, and there's a friend of mine. Her name is Nancy Spurry, and my boss would, he would tell me go out there and socialize, network, if you will. And we heard about this organization called Toastmasters, and there was Cherry Creek Toastmasters in Denver, Colorado. They had over 150 members. And so there apparently was, it was going to be a big meeting. So my boss said, get out there, meet these people. So I went there originally to network, and I just really, really enjoyed it. And by the way, the conversation I had with Nancy, she said, I'm going to this group called Toastmasters tomorrow. She says, do you want to come with me? Because we work for the same company. I said, well, sure. And she says, I said, what time's the meeting? She says, 7 o'clock. I says, all right, I'll pick you up tomorrow night. She says, oh, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. I said 7 o'clock in the morning, and this group is called Toastmasters. And I'm thinking to myself, these people are drinking in the morning. I want to see this. So I was so disappointed that first meeting. There was no alcohol. There was like no toast, nothing. They just had coffee and tea and water. But that's how I got involved. And I felt I had met my tribe, if you will. I immediately hit it off. I enjoyed it a great deal. And again, that was not my purpose, my intention at all. I just liked the socialization. It did help me with my confidence because I lost a political battle working in a Fortune 500 company, and I had been removed from the company. So my ego was still hurting from that particular circumstances, and Toastmasters was the perfect place for me to rebound.
And along the way, I take it you became better as a presenter, as a public speaker. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Well, let me give you some backstory. So I'm a stutterer. There's no cure for stuttering. Now, you probably know this, and your listeners and your viewers would know this as well. Children can be the cruelest people on earth. So when you're a kid and you stutter, you become a victim. You get bullied a lot. And so my dad was in the military. We would move every 18 months to a new city. So I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I remember I was 8 years old, and we're about to move back to Chicago, this time to a different neighborhood. And I was determined that these kids would not find out about my stuttering problem. So I did a couple things. Number one, every day before school and after school, I would read magazines out loud. Now, then I had this brilliant idea. In my neighborhood, kids played basketball outdoors all the time. So I said, hey, I'm going to be a play-by-play announcer. So I walked up to the kids and said, who's your favorite, player? I memorized all the names, and I did play-by-play on the playground. My only purpose was to make sure that people would not make fun of me in terms of stuttering. So we moved to the new neighborhood. Guess what? None of the kids know that Ed's a stutterer. And I don't have a severe case, but I double clutch. I do stammer occasionally. If I get nervous, it's very, very obvious. So from there, I went to a high school, South Shore High School in Chicago. They had a television studio. So I became a news anchor for the next 4 years. I go to the University of Illinois, and I actually get a job as a disc jockey, not at the student-run radio station, but the actual local radio station. I become the #1 disc jockey for the next 5 years. And by the way, that's how I earned my way through college. And then I became an executive in the computer industry. I became a spokesperson. So all these things in my background set the foundation for me ultimately competing in the World Championship of Public Speaking. So again, as I look back, you can't connect the dots looking forward. As Steve Jobs says, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. So as I connect my dots looking backwards, that's the thing that actually set me up to become successful as a world champion.
So I find that curious and perhaps even inspiring, because it's because of your flaws and shortcomings that actually enabled you to excel, because you addressed those flaws.
Absolutely. And again, I was driven. So I wasn't driven by, like you said, joining Toastmasters to become a professional speaker. No. If you look at my childhood, I was driven not to be made fun of, not to be bullied, because that was my motivation. And looking back on it, my weakness became a strength.
What lessons did you gain from Toastmasters that you now help business presenters present a stronger presentation? What are the strongest lessons that you gained that you convey to your clients to deliver a strong business presentation?
Number one, fear is not real. And what do I mean by that? So a lot of people, I'm pretty sure you've heard this statistic, the #1 fear is public speaking. That's not true at all. The #1 fear is public embarrassment. It's public humiliation. That's what people really, really fear. So they fear being embarrassed. The other thing is, I talk about, hey, I'm a stutterer. I won the World Championship of Public Speaking. You don't have that flaw. What's your excuse? Okay, so let's get over this fear right away. And this is a skill that can be learned like any other skill. You just need to put in time and effort and energy. So like with any skill, initially you'll suck at it if you try something new. Just don't stay at suck. That's the key here. The other thing when I'm coaching my clients is I require them to use video to record themselves. For example, one of the things about Cherry Creek Toastmasters is they were the only club in the city of Denver at the time that recorded every single one of our presentations. I think that gave me a competitive advantage. Connecting the dots, looking backwards. The first thing my clients say, oh, I don't like the way I look. I don't like the way I sound. And I have them repeat the following mantra. Let's repeat after me. I look like that. I sound like that. Get over it. Okay. We have to look and listen. So do you, so we get them over that. And I use video as I think video is a tool that can help. It's the fastest way for people to improve. George, it's one thing for me and you, we're both coaches. It's one thing for us both to tell our clients, you need to do this, you need to do that. We can repeat that until the cows come home. However, if they see it on video, they get it. So if they see it on video, they get it. We can actually show them exactly, okay, when you do this, let's play the video. And now they can actually see themselves. So for me, video is probably the best tool. So again, what I learned at Cherry Creek Toastmasters, again, they recorded every single one of our presentations. Video is a tool that'll help you make an incremental, a quantum leap in terms of improvement in terms of your public speaking skills. The other thing I learned from Toastmasters is this is an active skill. Speaking is an active skill. The only way for you to get better is to practice and rehearse in front of people. You cannot practice in your head. Okay. Have you ever had the experience of, oh, I'm just going to rehearse this in my head, and then different words came out at the time of the actual presentation? Has it ever happened to you?
Very much. Yes.
So anyway, so this is an active skill. You must rehearse, practice the skill out loud in front of people to see what works and what doesn't work.
When you talked about the importance of video, I did a flashback to decades ago when I ran for election as a school trustee.
Oh, wow.
And I had to deliver a speech, and I wrote what I thought was a pretty good speech. But at the time, I remember that my competition, they were much older than me. I was just a young guy, and I looked younger than I was. So I remember when I saw myself on video for the first time speaking, I couldn't believe how cold I looked. Because I was I was afraid that people would think I was too young. So I was trying to look serious and old like, and I wore a business pinstripe suit, and I didn't smile, and I stood stiff, and I looked like this scary kid who, like just terrible. I couldn't, and no one could have told me that. I had to see it. When I looked at it, I thought, oh my God, you look terrible, George. And we need to see that ourselves. No one can tell us that, because we go, oh, you're kidding. You're kidding.
Well, I for 14 years, I signed a non-disclosure, so I can't tell you the name of the company, but a very, very famous pharmaceutical company. And it's one of the pharmaceutical companies that's working on the COVID vaccine. So that's all I can say there. So for 14 years, we coach their top recruits. And their top recruits, these were young people in between the ages of 24 to 29 years of age. They were like masters, PhDs, etc. And they wanted to be taken seriously. So again, they would do exactly what you just did. And I would say, no, don't do that. You can't ignore the fact that you're young, or you're female, or you're minority, etc. That is going to be obvious. In order to be taken seriously is know your content. I have an aphorism. The aphorism is this: know your content so well that you can do it unplugged. We talked about this earlier, just before we started the call here. Know your content so well, and your job is to improve their condition. So if you provide them with an idea, tools, tips, strategies, etc., that's going to improve the audience's condition, they're not going to care how young you are. So focus on that. So that's probably the number one lesson I have for young people coming out of school, etc. Know your content, improve, focus on the audience, not yourself. Be audience focused, not self-centered, because that's the key to nervousness. One of the reasons that you're nervous is you're thinking about what other people are thinking about you. Okay. So for example, let me ask you a question. Let me ask George, it's a quick survey. All right. So generally speaking, when is a presenter the most nervous? At the beginning, middle, or end of a presentation? Just generally speaking.
Generally at the beginning.
Okay. So generally speaking, when is an audience the most skeptical of a speaker? The beginning, the middle, or the end?
The beginning.
Okay. When you agree that's a bad combination? So here's one thing you want to do as a presenter is the first thing I tell my clients, number one, memorize your opening. Okay. Memorize the first couple words. You don't have to memorize the entire presentation, but know specifically what you're going to say. Number two, make sure whatever that opening is, it is of value to the client. It is, you're going to break their preoccupation. You're going to be creative with that opening, but it's also something of value for them, because they're sitting there thinking like, I don't want this to be a waste of my time. So the first words that come out of your mouth have to be of interest to them. So make sure that you memorize your opening, whatever it is, and also memorize how you're going to close. What this will do is it'll give you complete and absolute confidence. You know how you're going to open, you know how you're going to close. Okay. And you don't necessarily have to memorize all the other points in between. Just know where you're going to go from it. Okay, what's your first main point, your second main point, your third main point, summarize, and then close.
Powerful. Know your opening, know your close, memorize them so you can deliver them without reading, without stumbling. And what happens in between, you don't have to be quite so good at it.
Well, you get into the flow. My whole point here is I want to get my clients into the flow. And once you get beyond that nervous point, and which is usually is around 2 minutes, you get into the flow. You start to relax. You already know the content. You already know the topic or the subject. I have complete confidence in them and knowing that. It's just, I just want to get them through that first 2 minutes. And once they make it through that first 2 minutes, then they start to relax, and then they get into the flow. And then their personality starts to come out, and their content and their ideas start to come out. And then since they already have memorized their closing, their momentum picks up over time. So as a coach, my job is to help them with their confidence, to help them with their flow, not necessarily with their content, because the people I work with, they already know their content. And in some instances, I have no idea what their content's about. I remember I was coaching this technical professional. He was a scientist. Didn't have a clue. Did not have a clue. However, because he was so technical, the thing I had to help him with was analogies and metaphors. I says, okay, you're talking to civilians. You're not talking to other scientists. So we have to come up with some metaphors and analogies that civilians, specifically investors, will understand. So because this guy, he was seeking, and he was pitching in front of some investors. He had worked with several other coaches, hadn't made a dime. After he worked with me, got $150 million infusion of cash into his business. So I'm pretty proud of that. And again, only thing I changed was memorize your opening, memorize your closing. Plus, he'd also, I used to work for a newspaper, Denver Rocky Mountain News in Colorado. And I remember the editor of the newspaper, he was always used to say to the reporters, don't bury the lead. This scientist, he had buried the lead. And I'll never forget this. So it took me almost 2 hours to figure out, because I was still trying to figure out, okay, what do you do? What is this thing that you're doing? He says, well, we got this contract with the Alaska pipeline. I says, excuse me, what? He says, yeah. Our sensors monitor the thousands and thousands of miles of pipeline from here to Alaska. I'm just like, could you have mentioned that first? How much was that contract worth? Oh, he says, yeah, that was like $500 million. I says, okay, this is your opening line. Prior to that in his presentation, that was buried deep into his presentation. It was like 45 minutes. But what, 45 minutes, no one stick around that long for that. So don't bury the lead. What's going to, again, that's an example of breaking preoccupation. Breaking preoccupation, you want to grab and keep the audience's attention.
Don't bury the lead. Good advice. Solid advice. Ed, tell us a little bit about the use of stories in business presentations? Are they appropriate? And how does one find the right story to use?
So the answer is yes. Okay, so yes, stories are appropriate. So, George, hold your hands up like this. Just hold them like this and repeat after me. Stories are sticky.
Stories are sticky.
Okay, audience, remember this, stories are sticky.
Stories are sticky.
Given a choice between data and statistics and a story is more memorable. A story is more memorable. Throughout human kind, we are wired for stories. This is how we pass information from one generation to the next generation. Numbers, data, and statistics are abstractions. Our brains are not wired to remember abstractions. And I'll prove it to you. The next time you give a presentation, which is packed with data, statistics, and numbers, here's what I'd like you to do 30 minutes later, is to give people a test. If their retention is greater, without looking at their notes, is greater than 10%, contact me, because that's remarkable. Typically, it's more like 1 to 2 or even 3%. Numbers and data by themselves are not memorable, and they're also typically boring. Okay, so what you want to do is, now there's a cognitive researcher, his name is Jerome Berner. He says the best way for people to remember your data and your statistic is to wrap it around a story. So if you tell a story around your data, your statistic, etc., then it is 22 times more memorable. 22 times more memorable than just the fact by itself. That is the power of a story. Now, some of you are thinking like, hey, I have no stories. Do you know what statistics are? Statistics are stories which have been shrunk, if you will. They've been compacted. So like if there's a data point that represents the point you're trying to make, take out that data point and tell the story of that data point. Guess what you've got? You've got a story. Now, typically the stories I tell in keynotes, they're anywhere from 5, 7 to, in some instances, even 15 minutes long. In business, that's way too long. Your stories need to be short and snappy. So 1 to 2 minutes, possibly 3 minutes, and that's it. 1 to 2, 3 minute stories around the point that you're trying to make. And stories can be found anywhere and everywhere. So for example, I have an exercise. It is my copyrighted material is called the Story Finder. I just did this with an audience in Singapore, and just this past week on Wednesday, an audience in London. And I showed them that they can create a story about anything, anywhere, and one of the funniest stories that came up this week was this woman in London. She talked about how to potty train a rabbit, a concept I had never conceived of before, but it was absolutely hilarious. But it made the point that, if you take the time to train anything, you can accomplish it. That was a point she was trying to make. And she did it in a very, very, very funny way. We were able to create that story starting from scratch in less than 20 minutes. So you can create stories about anything, etc. In fact, the more stories you create for your business presentations, it does several things. Number one, it makes you a person of interest. Number two, if you're pitching, your customers and clients are going to want to see you over and over again. So you build up a reputation of an individual that people want to hear from. So there's so many different benefits in terms of business storytelling.
One of the curious aspects of telling stories is, if it's a good story, people want to hear it again.
Mm-hmm.
And yet sometimes when we're the presenter, we think, well, I already told you that story, or I told you that in my last visit. Do you want to hear it again?
Well, I live outside of Las Vegas, and I had this recent epiphany why that is the case. So if you think of your favorite singer, your favorite entertainer, you want to hear the hits. You wanted to hear the hits. Well, the same thing is true of a speaker. And we have certain stories which are our hits, if you will, although we don't think of it that way. So I remember I spoke for the California Teachers Association. I was the keynote speaker 3 years in a row, which is rare, because usually if you're the keynote speaker 1 year, they want somebody new the following year. So for 3 years in a row, I was the keynote speaker. And for 3 years in a row, they wanted me to talk on the same topic and the same subject, which I thought was kind of strange. So the third year, I'm picked up by a woman at the airport. By the way, this is back in the days when we had social gathering, not social distancing. Okay. There were no masks, nothing. So she picks me up at the airport and she's driving me to my hotel. And she says, Mr. Tate, are you going to be telling the story about ABC 1, 2, 3? I said, well, yes, I will. And she says, are you going to tell this other story about this? And she proceeded to go through my entire presentation. And she says, oh, I'm so happy you're going to be telling that story. I've been telling all my friends about this story. And I did not realize I had created this experience for her that made it, again, and guess what she recalled? She recalled all my stories. And since she recalled the story, she recalled the points. That's the stickiness, the power of telling stories, is it makes your points, it makes your message memorable.
The stories are powerful, make them memorable. Ed, we're going to be wrapping up soon. Before we do, I want to mention the offer that you've made to listeners and viewers. And that's if you are planning to deliver a high stakes presentation and you would like to have a 20-minute call at no cost with Ed, he will take you through a clarity assessment. Ed, what does that mean? What will they gain from that?
What I've discovered is that, typically people, they kind of struggle with, how do I present this? I've got this is my background. These are my circumstances. How is this going to come across? And because I've been doing this for well over 20 years, in about 20 minutes, I can give people like 2 to 3 ideas in terms of how they can present that idea, how they can make that particular message memorable, or how they can breathe life into those particular points. So it's a free 20-minute assessment, no sales, there's no sales pitch, there's no cost, etc. So if that's something of interest to you, you can reach out to my staff at info@edtate.com and just send us a request, and we'll send you a link and send you an invitation for that. And that's basically it. So
that's at edtate.com, and there will be a link to Ed's site in the description of the podcast. Ed, in closing, could you tell us if there's one key message to presenters, to business presenters, when it comes to helping them deliver their stories for greater success? What would that one key point be?
That's a very, very good question. Number one, I would say, how are you going to improve the condition of the client? Because I have this saying, and sometimes I have audiences say, so what, who cares? What's in it for me? It's all about me. Now, no audience is ever going to walk up to you and say that, but they're thinking it. So what, who cares? What's in it for me? And it's all about me. And as a presenter or business presenter, or any type of presenter, you got to address those issues. What is the so what? Why should they care? It's all about the audience, and make it all about them. Answer those questions. What is the so what? Why should they care? And again, make it all about them. So if you just follow those simple guidelines, you will breathe life into your business presentations, and you will be more successful at winning high stakes presentations.
My guest today is Ed Tate, and I'll leave you with this final message: stories are sticky.
If you like what you heard, remember to like, comment, and share this podcast. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you convey your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.